Hey, what's going on, guys? Hey, it's Matt, and we are back ready to talk about more comic books. Whoop, I don't have my scene. There we go. Hey, guys, what's going on? Hey, thanks for being here tonight. My name is Matt, and this is another issue of Comics Daily Weekly, which is the weekly stream of my daily comic book Twitter account. If that sounds weird, it's because it is, but it is what it is. So every day I run a Twitter account at underscore comics daily weekly, and every day I read a different comic. Most of them are old Marvel comics from the '60s going forward. Every week in our time is a month's worth of comics from back in the day, and we are kind of going through and reading some, not all, but some Marvel comics from back in the '60s. We're experiencing these as they come out. So last week, I read 6 Marvel comics that were published in March of 1967. This week, I'm reading comics that were published in April of 1967, and we'll talk about those next week. But on the docket for today, we've got Amazing Spider-Man number 46, Tales of Suspense number 87, Daredevil number 26, Avengers number 38, Strange Tales number 154, and Fantastic Four number 60. So a good lineup there. Now, I'm not reading every comic that came out, or every Marvel comic that came out back in the '60s. Some of them I just don't care for, or it's not that I don't care for them. I just don't want to read them. I just don't feel like it. I'm not reading X-Men right now. I'm not reading Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. I'm not reading Tales to Astonish. Excuse me, just to name a few. We might get around to those at some point. I always intended for this to be sort of a basically we're going to read and talk about these as you would buy comic books every week, and you might add some comics to your pull list if you start to take an interest in them. You might remove some comics from your pull list if you start to lose interest in them, although I haven't done that yet. But I'm looking to maybe add a couple more as the weeks and the months go by. Looking at maybe adding X-Men at some point once they get out of sort of the early days of X-Men that I don't really love so much, and then of course they go into the reprint era there for a while. Probably gonna add Hulk whenever it breaks out of Tales to Astonish and because it becomes its own series. Of course, that's balanced out by Tales of Suspense coming to an end here in the next few weeks, and also Strange Tales. So some changes coming. I've got it all mapped out. So if you visit at underscore comics daily weekly, you'll see it here in a minute. I actually have a pinned tweet that shows every comic that I'll be reading for the next 2 years because I'm that nerd who plans everything that far ahead of time. I can tell you exactly what I'll be reading the week of Christmas in 2022, for example. So I just have fun planning that stuff. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. So these are 6 of the comics that came out in March of 1967. 1 second, please. Had to hit the cough button there. Let's flip over and get right into it. So Amazing Spider-Man number 46. We're just kind of starting off with a banger here because this one is notable for a couple reasons. This one is the first appearance of the Shocker, which, okay, sure. The Shocker, he's a fine villain. Everybody sort of knows that the Shocker is one of Spider-Man's rogues galleries. He's kind of on the B team of Spider-Man's rogues. He's fine. I don't dislike him, but he's not up there with my favorites. So we get his first appearance, and we also get a pretty big character development moment for Peter Parker in that he moves out of Aunt May's house. Finally, he's been talking about it for several issues now. He moves out of Aunt May's house and he moves in with Harry Osborn, and we're going to talk about that. But let's go ahead and start. Cool cover. We've, of course, John Romita. Like I say it every week. With every issue that goes by since Amazing Spider-Man number 39, which was John Romita's first issue on art duties. Every issue that goes by, we are slowly but surely getting more and more and more into that Romita style, the classic Romita style, which is one of my favorites, if not my favorite. And actually something I just noticed Let me look at my notes here. If you look at, yep, this is pretty cool. I didn't notice this until just now. So if you look at the box art right there, and again, sorry, if I ever release this in audio form and you listen to this in audio, you won't know what I'm pointing at. But if you look at the box art on the cover right there, this is the first issue with John Romita drawing Spider-Man in the box art. Up until now, it's been Steve Ditko Spider-Man, even though it's been a John Romita book. So that's pretty interesting. I can't believe I didn't notice that till just now. I kind of wish I had called that out on Twitter. But yeah, so we're getting more and more into that classic Romita style, and we're going to just continue to get there as the issues go by. We're still not quite there yet, but we are getting further and further away from how he was aping Ditko's style at the beginning. So let me get this going here. Marvel Unlimited on the web isn't the most cooperative thing, but it's easier than trying to share my iPad screen with all the notifications. So if you remember the last couple issues, Spider-Man was fighting the Lizard, and he hurt his arm. He hurt his left arm. He's got his arm. He's had his arm in a sling for the last couple of issues, and he's had some challenges with that, trying to not only fight with one arm, but also manage one arm as Peter Parker and have to not draw attention to himself. Spider-Man has an injured left arm. Peter Parker has an injured left arm. Maybe they're the same. So he's had to deal with that as well. But this issue just kind of starts right off with introducing the Shocker. Now, we do get his origin in a minute, and we'll talk about that because it's not the greatest. But, I mean, the issue starts right away with the Shocker robbing a bank. So the Shocker, excuse me. So I always, and I don't know why, because I know better, but every time I think the Shocker, I think that he has, like, electric powers, or his suit has electric powers, which is not true. Like, because I always think it's weird that Spider-Man has Electro and the Shocker, both who are, who use electricity as their power. But it's not true. Shocker, and I guess maybe it's the name Shocker. You think you get shocked with electricity or whatever, but it's more like an aftershock. So Shocker isn't electric based. He uses it's more about vibrations. He can control vibrations with his suit. How does he do that, you might ask? Well, like I said, we'll get into his origin, except that doesn't really answer those questions either. But it starts off basically just with Spider-Man meeting the Shocker and them having a little bit of a tussle. Really cool fight. I love seeing the John Romita art here. Spider-Man kind of gets beaten handily, though, which is funny because nowadays, anytime the Shocker shows up, Spider-Man puts him down quick. It's never really usually a contest, but back then, they had to make it a match at least for a little bit. So the Shocker gets the money and knocks around Spider-Man, manages to get away. Spider-Man's still got his arm in a sling, but something that's interesting here, let me find the right panel, is right in this sequence right here, this two panel sequence. Let's load that up here. So Peter's walking down the street after getting his butt kicked by the Shocker, and Harry pulls up and says, "Hey, what do you think about moving in together?" Peter's like, "I can't afford it." Harry says, "My dad is going to pay for it. My dad got me the greatest little apartment just a couple blocks away from campus." Peter's like, "That's awesome, but I got to talk to Aunt May about it." So Peter, again, Aunt May is so frail that the slightest little change of the wind is going to kill her, even though she went on vacation by herself, which seems irresponsible. But yeah, so Harry sort of puts out the vibes about, hey, let's move in together. So I made a note about that, though. So in the tweet about this, I said, I feel like we've missed about 2 issues worth of Peter and Harry relationship building. Over the past few issues, they have become more friendly towards each other, but I haven't seen them be close enough to want to live together yet. And that was a little bit weird. When Harry first showed up, and I hate that I can't remember the exact issue number, but Harry first showed up right when Peter went to college, and they were sort of enemies at first. That's back when Peter was dealing with a lot, and you had Harry, you had Gwen, you had Flash, and they would always talk to Peter, and Peter always had the weight of the world on his shoulders. He was always worried about Aunt May. He was always worried about maintaining his identity as Spider-Man and what it would do to her if she found out. So he was always he was always sort of downtrodden, and that group took offense to that, and that put, you know, that left a bad first impression in the mouths of Harry and Gwen. Slowly but surely, over the last dozen, 10, 12 issues or so, they have sort of mended that gap. Peter and Gwen have become closer, although not as close as they will be eventually. But so they have the group, and I talk about it every week. My favorite parts of any of these issues aren't the fights, but rather the relationship building and the character building. I love seeing these characters interact with each other, which is a complete opposite from when I was a kid reading Spider-Man comics. Not necessarily the really old ones like these, but I have read a lot of these, and when I was a kid reading them, I just want to see Spider-Man fight the bad guys. I didn't want to see all this talking, but now it's completely opposite of that, because I know where the relationships are going, and where the characters end up. I'm very interested in seeing their every single step of their journey there that I haven't necessarily seen before. So anyway, we have seen Peter and Harry grow closer, but I just haven't really seen them grow. I haven't seen enough yet to where they're ready to move in together. What's up, entertainment nerd? Oh, Peter, he is easily influenced by Harry. That's right. That's exactly right. And it's a little bit off-putting. But I mean, it is what it is. I mean, they're going to move in together, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move through this issue. But it just really struck me as this sort of happened out of nowhere. They are very friendly with each other, but move-in ready, not quite. Here's the next panel. If you wanted to share the place with me, Pete, I'll bet we could have a ball. You didn't read me, son. I said my dad got me the place. He's footing the rent bill, and that's perfect because Peter is always broke. So it's so perfect. But he's still got to talk to Aunt May. Meanwhile, he's got to go to the Bugle. He's going to sell some more pictures. And remember, we talked last week about how Frederick Foswell is really suspicious of Peter. He wants to know how Peter is getting all these awesome shots of Spider-Man. So he's going to tail Peter. He's going to follow him and figure it out. So he has this other identity named Patch, excuse me, that he uses to sort of infiltrate the underworld. So that's what he's going to. And I don't buy this either, because Peter's spider sense would have triggered him, I think, already at this point. It does later, but I think it already would have gotten him at this point if somebody were following him. So that's a little bit strange. But anyway, the Shocker goes back to his lair, and here's where we get the weak origin of the Shocker. He was basically a safecracker. He was a thief. He's a safecracker, right? And he got caught, went to prison, but just so happened to know how to build devices that could control vibrations. I mean, that's fine. I mean, this was back in the 60s. I guess back then we didn't need such elaborate origins for everybody. We just sort of assumed that everybody knew how to do all this stuff. So it's like I've talked about over the last several weeks, how every villain that we've read about over the last several months, every villain has an android, right? Every villain has, and it's not only an android, but most of those androids are able to absorb the abilities of other people or other heroes. In the pages of Daredevil we talked about a few weeks ago, the Masked Marauder and Gladiator, when they teamed up, they just so happen to have an android that could do that. The Tri-Man, where'd they get him? I don't know. They never said. It's okay. We just have to go with it. So he's in prison. And what's funny about this too, real quick, is that they were very not concerned back in the old days with giving characters their real names. Like, over in the pages of Avengers, we're going to be talking about Avengers, what did I say, number 38 here in a little while. We still haven't, up to this point, learned Hawkeye's real name over in Avengers, right? Which is kind of bizarre. Peter Spider-Sense seems to be a matter of convenience, especially in the movies. There's no rhyme or reason to it, no true rules. Entertainment Nerd, you're exactly right, especially in these old issues. I do feel like it gets more consistent as you get into the 70s, 80s, on into the 90s, especially nowadays. I do feel like it gets better. It gets a little bit tighter. You're right about the movies, though. Man, the movies are all over the place with his spider sense. It's really inconsistent in these old issues because it hasn't happened so much lately, but in issues way before this, his spider sense, it wasn't a thing that would alert him of impending danger. It was just, he just sensed things. Like, I sense that this guy is around the corner. Even though somebody may not pose a danger to him, I sense that this is a thing that's happening, or I sense that that guy's over there. So in these old issues, it was really inconsistent, but that could be forgiven because, I guess Stan was still trying to figure out how it was supposed to work. So, I'll give it a little pass. I mean, we're only 46 issues into what will become, over 1,000 issues worth of Spider-Man stories that we've read over the years. So anyway, the Shocker creates this suit. He has to make it a padded suit in order to, absorb the vibration. How does he do that in prison? He just does. We just roll with it. It's fine. We don't need to concern ourselves with that. Meanwhile, so like I said a minute ago, how Aunt May went off on vacation by herself, which is wildly irresponsible for Peter to send his super duper frail Aunt May on a vacation by herself. She's back now, and she had a great time. So she has talked to Anna. This all works out perfectly. So she has talked to Anna Watson, Mary Jane's Aunt Anna, about them moving in together. So it works out great. Of course, Peter's worried about talking to Aunt May about moving in with Harry. Aunt May's worried about talking to Peter about moving in with Anna Watson. And but they hash it out. It all works out great. Let's see. I'm just gonna double check, see if I got any notes on their conversation. Yeah, I do have one. Yeah, right here. Dadgum. There we go. So Aunt May talks about how she had a wonderful time on vacation. I had a great time on vacation, and then she just starts crying out of nowhere because she was so worried about Peter. And I did make a note that she basically just needs to be on some Xanax or something because she apparently has severe anxiety problems. Now, I'm a parent. I understand worrying immensely about your kids 24/7. But my kid is 12, and Peter is pushing 20 at this point. You know what, too? Who's the guy? That happens a lot, where they just draw people looking at the camera, and I've just got to think that that's like an Easter egg. Like maybe it's somebody in the Marvel bullpen that Ramita thought would be fun to just stick in there. But I would love to know who that is. I want to know that guy's story. The minute I saw this panel, my eyes instantly went to that guy. I want to know who he is and what his story is. I want a whole mini-series of that guy. So Aunt May had a great time, but she's still super worried about Peter, even though she can clearly see he's fine, only he has a sprained arm from his motorcycle. But she also is worried about talking to Peter about moving out. Mrs. Watson is so lonely since Mary Jane moved away, and she wants me to come and stay with her. I'd love to do it, but it would mean leaving you, poor 20-year-old Peter, all alone. We know how frail you are, even though you're 20 and you're an adult. But then that's when Peter breaks the news to her about it's one of Aunt May's booty calls, right? Right. He maybe maybe she met him on vacation. You could be right. So excuse me. So this was a pretty cool conversation, or not a cool conversation, but a very nice conversation, and it's going to set them both on a different a different life path than what we've seen about them, what we've seen from them previously. And it's great because I feel like, if you don't know, Spider-Man always has been and always will be my favorite superhero of all of them. He's been my favorite superhero since 1984 or 85 when the Secret Wars figures came out. I still have my original Spider-Man Secret Wars figure over there. I was 5 years old. Whatever year it came out, I was 4 or 5 years old, and that just set me on the path of loving Spider-Man forever. I don't know how one figure can do that, but that was just, I loved that toy, and that's just what sunk me into the world of Spider-Man, and I've been there ever since. But aside from that, one of the things that I love about Spider-Man that or Peter Parker that is really evident in these old issues is that more than any other character that I'm currently reading, and we're going to talk about the rest of them, but I feel like he has the most development in the shortest amount of time. So 46 issues, he's already graduated high school, he's already started college, he's got the job, the Daily Bugle. Now he's moving in, excuse me, with Harry. He has more development than anyone else. And it's been really fun to see. And like I said, we're gonna in these next couple of pages are Peter interacting with Peter and his amazing friends, as I like to call them. You got Gwen here. Of course, they are about to, they're throwing a party because Flash has joined the army and he's about to get shipped off. I actually read issue number 47. I read that on Sunday, so we'll talk about that next week. But there's more about that in the next issue. But they're going to get together after they, Peter and Aunt May, after they hash out their living arrangement. Sorry about that. After they hash out their living arrangement, the gang gets back together again. And like I said, these are my favorite parts of these old issues is the gang hanging out. I just love the interaction with them all. I've said it before, I love Mary Jane's character in these old issues because she just is such a free spirit. She's written a little bit flaky, but she's such a free spirit. She's not like Betty or Liz when Peter doesn't want to go out and they freak out wondering why. Mary Jane just like, okay, whatever. And it's actually Peter now that is that way, really more towards Gwen than anything. And we'll get more of that next issue as well. I want to find the right panels, though, because it's these two right here where I said I could just read... I could read a whole series of Peter Parker and his amazing friends just hanging out using 60s slang. I mean, these whole two panels are fantastic. Ready to dive into a two-scooper with me now, MJ? Not while the juke is jumping, Dad. Since you can't shake up a storm with your wing and a sling, I'll take a rain check till the coins run out. She's just so fun. Mary Jane is so fun to read in these old issues. Like I said, she's a little bit on the flaky side, but that's not a bad thing. She's just carefree. She's just living life. She's having fun. I wasn't alive back in the day, but I do wonder if, like Harry's saying here, hey, you mean it was okay with your aunt? Man, that's the living end. And that phrase comes up probably every other issue of Spider-Man. And I think it's crept up in some other issues of some other books as well. I would love to know if that was a real saying because that happens all the time and I crack up every time I read it. But but I just love these interactions. I love these interactions with these characters. But then that's all we get from this issue with those, and the rest of it is Spider-Man and Shocker fighting, which is good. But before that, I thought maybe this little subplot would drag out a little bit longer. But Frederick Foswell, in his Patch identity, does follow Peter, and here, oops, sorry, I didn't flip that back. Here is actually where Spider-Man's Spider Sense comes into play. My spider sense is tingling like mad. Somebody's watching nearby. It's Patch, the stool pigeon. Although I guess he doesn't remember. I guess he doesn't know that Patch is Frederick Foswell, which makes sense. But if he saw me waltz in here as Pete sees me now as Spidey, he won't have to be an Einstein to dig my secret. I got to think of something but fast. So it's pretty funny what happens. He actually ends up stuffing his suit with webbing and makes it sound like they're talking to each other. Peter and Spider-Man are talking to each other. And then sort of pushes his suit away to make it look like Spider-Man's swinging away, and he walks around the corner, and that's how he throws him off the trail. And that's the classic bait and switch. We saw it. I always think about the '66 Batman series when people started to suspect that Batman and Bruce Wayne were one of the same. So Alfred puts on the bat suit and stands up on top of a building. I always think about that, but it happens a lot, and it happens here too. So. There wasn't anything about this in the next issue, so I guess this is done for now. And also, Spider-Man's arm is better. So, yay. That's a good thing. Because he's had his arm in a sling for several issues, and it was starting to get a little tiring. So that's good. We don't have to worry about that anymore. Um, and the rest of it, like I said, is just Spider-Man and the Shocker going at it. The Shocker is robbing another bank, and they fight, and Spider-Man wins. And there's nothing really, not really trying to lessen that, but you know, just a fight, just a battle. Some good acrobatics by Spidey. You guys know I say it every week. I love the heroes that are more agile and acrobatic, like Spider-Man or Daredevil or Nightwing over on the DC side. Those kind of guys. I love those. The heroes that are a little bit less powerful than the enemies they're fighting, and they have to sort of use their brains to figure out how to win. Although I wouldn't say Shocker is more powerful than Spidey. But I mean, it's great. Spider-Man basically webs right here. I love the way that Spidey wins this. He webs Shocker's thumbs to his arms so that his thumbs can't come down to press the buttons. You know? His thumbs get stuck. I love that. That's fantastic. That's a great way to beat a villain. And then at the end, it's moving day. So Aunt May is moving out. Peter's moving out. Peter's moving in with Harry, and he's still a little bit. He's still worried about Aunt May, but we're gonna get over that. He gets over that, and thus, like I said, so this starts a whole new life path for Peter. I think about so many issues I've read of Peter living in different apartments with different roommates. Coming in and out of skylights and always running into problem with the landlord and can't pay his rent. We're not there yet, but this is the start of all of those really fun stories about regular old guy Peter Parker having to deal with real world problems and also being a superhero. So this is where that starts, and we will follow that path next week. All right, so moving on to Tales of Suspense number 87. Now, again, I've said it before. I'll say it again. Tales of Suspense at this point is a twofer. It's a comic that features an Iron Man story and a Captain America story. We have 12 more issues before... 12 or 13. Well, 99 is the last one. So I guess 13 more issues before Iron Man breaks off into his own title with Iron Man number 1. And Captain America will continue the numbering of this book, but it'll change to Captain America number 100. So we will get there according to my schedule. We'll get there right at the end of this year, or maybe it's the first week in January. We'll get there. But right now it's still a twofer, and I'm reading both of these. And this has been a pretty consistently good book over the last several weeks, several issues. So this one wasn't quite as fun. This one, the Iron Man story of this one is basically just a setup. And let me flip over to my notes here for this one so I can remember anything. The tough part about doing this show a week later is I've already read several books since these ones that we're talking about, so they all kind of run together. But the Mole Man is in this one, and I always really enjoy seeing heroes battle villains that they aren't normally associated with. So everybody associates Mole Man with the Fantastic Four, but even though Mole Man has tangled with the Avengers once already, that may have been before. I think it was before I started doing this show. And he comes back here, and also next issue, it's Mole Man versus Iron Man, which is pretty cool. So, normally those two characters don't interact, but they do here, and it's fun. Gene Colan on art on this one. He's been doing this and Daredevil for several issues of each now, and he's getting better and better with every issue. I've said it before, but I want to mention again, I love how when Happy first appeared, they drew him as like a... physically, they drew him as like a big, dumbling dolt. Like he had, a big forehead and a big chin, and he just looked, they kind of made him look like an old washed up boxer, I guess. I don't know if that's a great description, and now they've, over the course of these last couple dozen issues, he's sort of become a little bit more debonair, I guess. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, you can see here, he definitely doesn't look like what he looked like when he first appeared. So, I don't know. that's the point of that's one of the points of reading books like this every week, is so that we can identify trends, and we can see characters change, we can see them develop, we can see their physical appearance change and adapt over time. So it's just one of the things that I notice as I read this every week. I did make a note of this particular panel where Tony is trying to get Happy and Pepper out of the lab because he's developing a new atomic drill that will help humanity, I guess. It'll promote exploration into the Earth's crust, just as submarines have helped underwater exploration, right? But he's wanting them to get out of the lab because he's working on it. He doesn't know Tony doesn't know what's going to happen. He's still experimenting with this drill. And Happy does make the point of saying, the day that Tony Stark needs help on a job, we'd all better head for the hills. And my note on that was Tony literally needed Happy's help convincing the world that he wasn't Iron Man a couple of issues ago. So, I guess we should head for the hills because Tony already needed Happy's help. Like I said, this story really kind of more sets up the next one, which I actually read and posted today. So we'll talk about that next week. But all through these pages, Tony's testing a drill, an atomic drill that's going to drill through the Earth really well, I guess. He's got to put on his Iron Man suit for protection. And it's working. People are... there's always a crowd of people here. No matter what book it is, and especially in this book, there's always a crowd of people standing outside of Stark Industries. Or there's always a crowd of people watching Iron Man fight somebody. I mean, it's all the time. And I don't know, like, who are these people and why are they always there? I want a mini series about these people. Who are they? Are they the press? I mean, they don't look like they're taking notes. But they're watching something crazy going on, and all of a sudden, like, buildings start sinking into the ground, which we know is because of the Mole Man. Obviously, the characters in the book don't know yet. But I did find this a little tired because this is the third time the Mole Man has done this. And I made a note about this. It's not. I haven't. Well, let's get there, and then I'll talk about it. And this issue is really bizarre too. It's almost like they had to pad the story because these buildings are getting sucked into the ground. We're not there yet with Stark Industries. These buildings are getting sucked into the ground, which you think is story enough. But then in the middle of this issue, there are these thugs that say, hey, we should take this opportunity to go rob Stark Industries of all their secret plans so that we can sell them. And that has been the plot of so many of these issues, is somebody, whether it's a common thug or a supervillain, somebody wants to break into Stark Industries and steal secret weapon plans so they can sell them. And that's getting a little bit tired as well. So, but the weird thing about this issue is these guys go to steal these plans, Iron Man stops them, and that's it. Like, these guys don't figure into the story anymore. So it's like, what was the point of having them in the first place? So here's where, so this is where Stark Industries gets sucked into the ground. And I did make a note. I said, this is the third time that Mole Man has sunk buildings into the earth, right? Fantastic Four number 22 and Fantastic Four number 31 were the other two, though in those issues he was sinking entire cities into the ground. So I guess he's narrowing the scope of his plans at this time. But again, the Mole Man's sucking buildings into the ground. Ugh, come up with something better. But the reason he wants to do it is because he has been monitoring the surface world, right? Because we talked about it, I think it was last week or the week before, how supervillains back in this era can just monitor whatever they want. Like, they can even, like, monitor heroes in their headquarters without the heroes knowing. So how any hero maintains a secret identity, I don't know, because the villains always have some kind of view screen in their headquarters, and they're just sitting there watching the heroes go about their daily lives like it's a reality show. It's bizarre. But Mole Man has been monitoring what's going on at Stark Industries. He knows about the atomic drill, and he wants the atomic drill in order to more easily drill up to the surface world so that his army of shoot, their names are escaping me. What are his little creatures called? Darn, he says it next issue. I can't remember. But he wants to drill in order to get up to the Earth's surface more efficiently. I can't imagine if he has the ability to suck buildings down into the Earth. I can't imagine he can't also get up to the surface as easily, but, you know, I guess he can't. So, they don't really tangle this issue. That issue, confrontation comes next issue. But like I said, this was basically setting up next issue. So we'll talk more about that next week. But you can see the Mole Man's there. Iron Man's trapped under some rock. That's not good. And we'll find out what happens next week. We'll find out if he lives next week. The Captain America... Oh, boy. This Captain America story... So in my tweets about this issue, I did talk about how this issue as a whole was very underwhelming. How the Iron Man story was basically a setup for next issue. I said the Cap story was even worse. So this guy that you see, this laughing guy right here, his name is the Planner. He's a lame villain with a lame plan who we'll hopefully never see again. And I really hope we never do this. This was awful. This was one of the worst. This was the worst Captain America story since he fought the Tumbler. Although that was part of a larger story with the Super Adaptoid. So even that had a little bit of a of a shine to it. This may be the worst Captain America story since Captain America started appearing in Tales of Suspense back in issue number 59. So in almost 30 issues of Tales of Suspense, this may be the worst one. This guy his name is the Planner. And he dresses up as Captain America. He's got this laser. So if you think about, I've already forgotten his name. That the Avengers fought. Not the Masked Marauder. That's Daredevil. Living Laser. Gosh, the living Laser. Remember how I talked about the Living Laser was lame because his whole shtick was he had one laser on one hand? This guy's the same thing. He's got one laser on one hand. It can apparently cut through a bank vault. And he's dressing up as Captain America doing it. His henchmen are wearing ridiculous costumes. But he's framing Captain America, and everybody just believes that Captain America is doing this because he's wearing a Captain America suit. You know, not like anybody can just do that. But yeah, his whole shtick is that he just has a laser, and his plan is that he wants Captain America's shield because he thinks there's a lot of tech in Captain America's shield. There was Tony Stark put some transistors in Cap's shield so that it would automatically come back to him. I don't know what other tech was ever in there. There wasn't ever... I don't think they ever mentioned any other tech that was in Cap's shield. But that's the Planner's big plan, is he wants Captain America's shield because of all the tech that's inside it. I did think this panel was funny. So basically, he has framed Captain America for these crimes, right? And so Captain America's kind of a wanted man. People are still a little bit iffy on, was this really Cap? I don't know. He doesn't really seem like the type that would do this. But then again, we did see him rob a bank. So keep in mind, Captain America's identity is not public yet. So Captain America is a wanted man. So Captain America tells Jarvis to tell the police that he's going to send somebody down to talk to the police. So this panel's funny because he says, basically I paraphrase it as, "Hello, officer, you don't know me, but you'll just have to trust me when I say that the guy you think is a criminal sent me down here to see what information you have on him. Thanks for your cooperation." So Steve Rogers comes down and says, "Well, I'm an old friend of Cap's, and you have to work with me on this." Well, if Captain America's a wanted criminal, why would they work with a guy who was his friend? I just thought that was a little bit weird. Again, it's things like that you notice that I like to point out. It's bad storytelling. But really, this story is so bad. It's just not good. I mean, Cap ends up confronting the Planner and his goons. I am trying to find the part. Oh, I made a note of it. It's this panel right here. So the Planner does say something about wanting Cap's shield because of all the tech. And Cap actually, he says, this phony Planner, whoever he is, must have learned that Iron Man once customized my shield into a transistorized arsenal. There was never any arsenal-type tech in there except for the big magnet. He says, actually, I took all those gadgets out months ago, but there's no use telling my attackers any of that. Well, he could try, I guess. But the rest of it is just Cap fighting these dumb villains. He defeats them handily. It was dumb. There's nothing more to say. This whole story was dumb. It's a one and done. This story does not continue into the next one. So yeah, you're better off passing. You could really, if you're reading these, you could just skip this whole issue. This Cap story isn't even worth reading, and the Iron Man story, remember, just Mole Man sucks some buildings into the ground because he wants a Tony Stark tool, and he sucks in Iron Man, and they're going to fight next issue. So that could be all you take away from this issue. You could skip this one altogether. So, moving on to Daredevil number 26. So this is part 2 of an awful 3-part Daredevil story. So if you remember, we talked last week about how awful that Daredevil issue was with Leapfrog, who has springs on his shoes, and I guess that makes him a threat. He has springs on his shoes, which allows him to leap wherever, and that compels him to put on a giant frog costume and jump around and cause chaos. Not only was that issue terrible for that reason, but we also, it was the introduction of Mike Murdock, who, so if you remember, this is going to come, I'm going to talk about this again next week too, so, because this grinds my gears. So, Spider-Man, who several issues ago, figured out that Daredevil is Matt Murdock. Spider-Man, for some reason that we will never know, Spider-Man writes a letter or a note to Matt Murdock / Daredevil and says, hey, Daredevil, I figured out who you really are, but don't worry, I'm not going to tell anybody. Well, guess who finds that letter but Karen and Foggy, right? So then hey, Matt, why is Spider-Man writing a note saying that you're Daredevil? That's crazy. And at the spur of the moment, Matt's like, take this college credit. Actually, it's not me. It's my brother, my twin brother, Mike Murdock, that I have never told either one of you about, even though Foggy and I went to college together and we've known each other for years. It's my twin brother, Mike. It's so ridiculous. I hate that. And then, he actually has to put on a Mike Murdock costume, if you will. He has to act like a complete douche in order to fool Karen and Foggy into thinking that Mike Murdock is a real person, even though they never question the fact that they don't see Mike and Matt together ever. It's a horrible story, horrible villains, horrible premise. Well, this is the continuation of that. So, I don't remember if... Is this? I think this is. Is this the? Yeah. This is the one where Leapfrog. He was caught last issue, and he goes on trial this issue. But before we get there, Daredevil's swinging around the city. He jumps in. He's got to put on his Mike Murdock disguise, which means messing up his hair, putting on some dumb-looking sunglasses, and wearing a stupid hat with a feather in it, and talking to Karen in a chauvinistic way, and she apparently digs it, I guess. So yeah, more Mike Murdock. He's awful. And I hate it too, because in my write-ups for this issue and last issue and the issue that I'll be putting out tomorrow, which we'll be talking about next week, I actually find myself talking about Mike Murdock as if he's a completely different character. And I hate that. Because he's not. He's the same guy. He's Matt Murdock. He's Daredevil. So we get more douchebag Mike Murdock. Dumbest character ever. And the trial. They do have a run in with what is it, Mr. Farnham. He's the guy that I'll only bring this up. This will come up later. Mr. Farnham is the guy who owns the building that their office is in, and he's always talking about how they're such good clients, or they're such good tenants. They never cause a ruckus. They always pay on time. Or actually, I don't think they are paying on time. I think that's why one of the reasons he's talking to him. And yeah, we'll get you the money, and he's cool with that because they're such good tenants. It's cool that they pay late, I guess. So, Leapfrog is on trial. Leapfrog is on trial. He's denying everything. Hey, these shoes with springs on them, they look like they fit. If the shoes don't fit, you must have quit, I guess. He says, well, let me try them on, and I'll show you, right? And the minute he puts them on, I did make a note of this panel in the bottom. It says, having springs on his shoes makes you unstoppable, I guess, right? So Leapfrog leaps out of the courtroom. Mike Murdock has to change to Daredevil. Meanwhile, Stiltman, as if this story wasn't bad enough with Leapfrog and Mike Murdock, now Stiltman is involved. What? This isn't good. Let me say this about Stiltman. Stiltman is ridiculous, but Stiltman he's almost one of those so bad he's good, or bad meaning ridiculous, like a real cheesy B movie. Like, it's so bad that you can't help but like it. Stiltman is like that. Stiltman is lame. Lame as all get out. But you can't help but kind of like him for his ridiculousness, right? So, Stiltman shows up. Why? I don't know. I did make a note. I said, remember how I hated last issue because of Leapfrog and Mike Murdock? What's up, Pete? I hated last issue because of Leapfrog and Mike Murdock. Add Stiltman to that, and you have an issue that's even worse. Why was Stiltman trying to free Leapfrog? I don't know. He just shows up. He's there to get Leapfrog, but we don't know why. It's really just an excuse for Daredevil and Stiltman to fight, I guess. And they do. Stiltman... the rest of this issue is just a fight between the two of them. It's cool seeing Daredevil swing around and do acrobatic stuff. He's got some kind of ray gun now, so that's cool, I guess. But he really shouldn't be posing this much of a problem. Plus, I don't know why Stiltman has this weird-looking armor with the big shell around his head. I don't get it, right? But they're fighting. I mean, this... I did make a note of this, too. His unstoppable crotch attack. Which, sure. But, oh my gosh. Stiltman. I mean, you can see as we flip through pages, this is actually giving a little bit of a flashback to what happened to Stiltman last time they fought, way back in Daredevil number 8, and how Stiltman actually got back. It's not important because it's dumb. Meanwhile, the Masked Marauder shows back up, another ridiculous villain. I talked about him just a minute ago, how he just so happened to have an android when he was hanging out with Gladiator. Where'd he come from? How'd he get it? I don't know. But we've seen Masked Marauder for a long time now, and we finally learned that he's actually Mr. Farnham, the owner of the building that Nelson and Murdock are in. The office is in. So, one kind of okay thing about this is that he has deduced, he doesn't know who Daredevil is, more on that next issue, he doesn't know who Daredevil is, but he's narrowed it down to being somebody close to Matt, Karen, and Foggy. So he knows that he can use them to figure out who Daredevil really is. So that's why he's always so friendly to Matt, Karen, and Foggy, is because he knows that he has a strong suspicion that they know who Daredevil is. And that's going to come up against next issue, so we'll leave it at that. More Daredevil and Stiltman fighting. Stiltman's ridiculous. This is how he defeats Stiltman. I don't know how this isn't the way that Stiltman is defeated every time. This is Empire Strikes Back. Luke wrapping the cable around the legs of the AT-AT, and the AT-AT falling over. Same thing here, right? That's all he does. Takes Stiltman down. However, Mr. Farnham, aka the Masked Marauder, is there to pull Stiltman to rescue him, I guess, before Daredevil can get to him. Now, I did make another note too. At the end of this, what does Masked Marauder want with Stiltman? Well, we learned that next issue, so we'll talk about that next week. Next week's issue is only slightly better than this for two reasons, and we'll talk about that next week. But this was lame. This is part 2, I guess, of a lame 3-part Mike Murdock story. And even after next issue, we aren't done with Mike Murdock, because he's referenced again on the covers in later issues. So Daredevil has been one of my favorite titles to read. Probably Spider-Man and Tales of Suspense and Daredevil have been my top 3 of the 6 that I read every week. But Daredevil last week and this week were just awful. Just awful. And next week isn't any better. So we're going to move on past this because it's bad. Avengers number 38 is only marginally better. It's actually, I don't know. It's actually probably a little bit better than it has been. but that was a really low bar to begin with. So this issue we get Hercules, which this is not his first appearance, but it is his first appearance in the Avengers, in an Avengers book, I should say. So I did make a note, and we're going to skip through this half of this real fast. The first 10 pages of this issue are the Avengers fighting with each other, and that's probably one of the reasons why I haven't really enjoyed any Avengers issue in 38 issues now. Except for maybe the few around the somewhere in the teens, when the Masters of Evil showed up, Baron Zemo, Enchantress, Executioner, those guys. Right around when Wonder Man showed up, I think. Right in there is when they were pretty okay. But there's still 38 issues in, and the Avengers are still fighting with each other. It's ridiculous. Hawkeye has been part of the team for 22 issues. Hawkeye, Quicksilver, and Scarlet Witch have been part of the team for 22 issues, and they're still fighting with each other. Hawkeye and Goliath are still going at it. They are arguing about Hawkeye wants Black Widow to be part of the team, and Goliath doesn't want that because she was a bad guy, even though Hawkeye used to be a bad guy and he's part of the Avengers. The one really dumb thing about this argument is this panel right here. Make sure you can see it. There we go. Cap finally calms him down. Says, stop fighting. We'll figure it out. Goliath thinks to himself, funny. Remember, Goliath and Hawkeye were fighting about Black Widow being part of the Avengers. Goliath does not want Black Widow to be part of the Avengers. But then he thinks to himself, funny, I can't pinpoint any one reason why I don't want Black Widow in the Avengers, but somehow I can't shake my hunch that her admission now would be a disastrous mistake. I mean, I know this is Goliath doesn't know why he doesn't want Black Widow to be admitted to the Avengers, but he's still willing to fight with Hawkeye about it. So, ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Meanwhile, Black Widow is slinking around town, and she gets zapped with some kind of... she gets zapped with a vacuum ray that's actually pulling her upwards, I guess. Kind of makes no sense, but more on that in a minute. Meanwhile, we see... This is our first glimpse of Hercules that we get. He is fighting Ares, I believe. Is that Ares? Oh, Eros. Nope, not Eros. Yeah. The Prince of Power now fear women as well as the flail of... Yeah, it is Ares, right? While they're fighting or sparring or whatever, the Enchantress shows up. And she's, basically been excommunicated from Asgard, if you will. And she wants revenge on the Avengers. and she wants Hercules' help to do it. So she basically puts him under a spell. She gives him like a special drink that's laced with poison. It's not poison, but she put. Long story short, she puts Hercules under her spell, and she's going to use Hercules to get revenge on the Avengers. And that's that. I mean, that's the crux of this whole issue is the Avengers versus Hercules. Hercules isn't a bad guy, but he's under Enchantress's spell, so they have to fight. Meanwhile, the one thing I did like about this issue, one thing I found interesting, and I hope we get to see more of this story, is S.H.I.E.L.D. actually recruiting Black Widow for a mission. Now, in later years, Black Widow and S.H.I.E.L.D. become synonymous with each other. Black Widow works with S.H.I.E.L.D. a lot. In the movies, she's a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. She was a spy. She's become a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. But Nick Fury pops up. And he says he has a mission for her. But that now for the details of this mission. But remember, nobody can know about your mission, not even that bow-slinging boyfriend of yours. And she says, I understand, and I won't tell anybody. He says, atta girl, you'll make a great secret agent yet. And that's Black Widow's big thing, is she is a super spy. She's a secret agent, right? So I'm really intrigued by this one page in this whole issue. I really want to see what this mission ends up being. I don't know if we're going to get to see that in Strange Tales. We're kind of running out of time. There's only about a dozen or so issues of that left before it goes kaput. Although I think that leads pretty quickly into an actual Nick Fury series, but I can't remember when that comes out. So I'm interested in this, and this is important too because this is going to set Hawkeye on a whiny path to whining and crying. Meanwhile, Captain America has run out on an urgent call saying that Bucky isn't dead. That does not figure into this issue. That actually happens in the next issue of Tales of Suspense. So we probably should have read this issue and the next issue of Tales of Suspense at the same time because they sort of run parallel to each other. But we'll get to that next week. I read it today, or yesterday or today. I posted about it today. We'll get to that next week. So you can see in this one panel, Captain America fighting Swordsman and Power Man after getting a message that Bucky was still alive. That story is in the next issue of Tales of Suspense, and we'll talk about that next week. So we're left with Hawkeye, Wasp, Goliath, Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch. Black Widow shows up to say, hey, you know that whole me being an Avenger thing? Never mind. Don't worry about it. I can't tell you why, and I can't tell you where I'm going, but it's not going to be here. And she leaves. And that really upsets Hawkeye. You know, he starts crying about it. Black Widow has to lie to Hawkeye. She says, forget any foolish thoughts of romance between us, for it was a fate never meant to be. Or it was fated never to be. And, you know, she's basically trying to throw Hawkeye off the scent. Well, Hawkeye, that sends him over the edge. He supposedly quits the Avengers. He throws his bow down. He says he's leaving. The Wasp says she's going with him for some reason, I guess. Remember, Wasp was with Goliath, but Wasp is going to go off with Hawkeye, which leaves Goliath, Quicksilver, and the Scarlet Witch at Avengers HQ. And not a minute after Hawkeye and the Wasp leave, but Hercules shows up, and he starts fighting the Avengers. And the Enchantress gets in there too. So the biggest part of most of the rest of this issue is just them fighting with Hercules. Hercules is big and strong, you know. They probably don't really stand a chance. Goliath can be big and strong as well, but I don't think he's up to the level of Hercules. But there's some cool shots in here of them fighting, sort of matching strength. But Hercules basically takes them all down. It is kind of neat that Scarlet Witch and Enchantress sort of fight each other. That's kind of a neat battle. They There's a ridiculous sequence. They do send out the emergency Avengers signal while Hawkeye. And again, we haven't ever learned, or I mean, we know Hawkeye's real name, but at this point in time, we still don't know what Hawkeye's real name is. But Jan and Hawkeye are out at dinner. They get the emergency Avengers signal, and they say, it's probably not an emergency. Hawkeye says, those creeps will yell Avengers Assemble every time something goes wrong with the pop-up toaster. So they just ignore it. Those crazy kids and their emergency signals, forget it. And the rest of this issue is the Avengers fighting Hercules and the Enchantress. Now, Hawkeye and the Wasp do show up eventually to help, and the cavalry does arrive at some point. Hawkeye shoots an explosive arrow at Hercules, and the smell of brimstone, it smells like brimstone because it's an explosive arrow, that kind of snaps him out. Or it says brimstone and sulfur are the same thing, and Hawkeye's arrows have sulfur because they're exploding arrows. So that snaps Hercules out of his trance, or out of his spell that he's under, that the Enchantress put him under. He tells Enchantress to leave. I don't know why they don't try to subdue her, but they just basically just kick her out of the house and say, get out of here. Meanwhile, Zeus shows up and is mad that Hercules left Olympus to go to Earth. Even though he was under Enchantress' spell, Zeus doesn't care. Zeus banishes Hercules to Earth for a year. And the Avengers like, hey, it's cool. I got a spare room. You can sleep on the couch. We'll make up a bed for you. We got some clean towels in the hallway closet. No worries. So Hercules is going to be hanging out with the Avengers for a while, I guess. And I don't know how prominently he features into every issue, but looking ahead just at the covers, I like to see, I just like to look at the covers and see maybe what kind of stories we're going to get. He is on the cover of several of them, and I want to say he eventually is up in the corner art, the box art, corner box art. His face is eventually up there. So Hercules is going to be around for a while. I did make a note that maybe that will make the stories a bit more interesting than they have been lately. So this issue was a little better, but I'm over the Avengers fighting with each other. It's 38 issues. They should be like a really unified team by now. So more to come on Hercules and his adventure with the Avengers. Moving on to Strange Tales, number 154. Now, again, just like with Tales of Suspense, Strange Tales is a twofer. Two stories in one. You've got Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and also Doctor Strange. I'm only reading the Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. stories out of these issues. Nothing against Doctor Strange. I think he's fine. I just didn't really feel like reading Doctor Strange. I don't know that I could really sort of handle the old issues of Doctor Strange. I did make a note. This was the most fun issue of Strange Tales I've read in a while. One thing that's cool about this is, for several issues now, Hydra has been 1 or 2 or maybe 3 steps ahead of S.H.I.E.L.D. at every turn. And that's pretty neat. So they've got this machine that has an appearance of a bald guy with a mustache for some reason, but it's called Autofac. And it's basically, they feed information into it for the purpose of finding out who the Supreme Hydra is. Now, if you remember last issue, the Supreme Hydra has been swapping identities almost every issue for the last several issues. He was Don Caballero. He got rid of that disguise and took on a different one whose name I can't remember. It wasn't a common name. I don't remember what that name was. And then last issue, he took over the identity of a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who was supposed to be on vacation. A S.H.I.E.L.D. agent by the name of Bronson. So he has now infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D., posing as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, and nobody knows yet. So I think that's really interesting. So the Supreme Hydra himself is behind enemy lines, infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D., posing as a Hydra agent. Schematics. Gotta love schematics. See the whole thing. I love panels with schematics like this. The Fantastic Four have had schematics of the Baxter Building several times. You see a lot of like in older Batman issues, you see like wide shots of the Batcave and talking about what's in there. I just love stuff like that. So schematics. And this issue also is fully drawn by one of Jim Steranko's first. Was Jim Steranko, for me anyway, is synonymous with Nick Fury, so it's really cool to see the Steranko style kind of come in. He penciled one or two issues before this, but it didn't quite look like Steranko yet. But we're starting to see it now, especially like in the face. I don't know why Strange Tales is the only issue that doesn't zoom properly, but Nick Fury's face, that's classic Steranko. He's getting more and more into his style. I like observing that kind of stuff as we go along. What else about this issue? So, Nick Fury is getting more gadgets. Like sort of James Bond. He's getting his gadgets back. He's getting a new suit that's lined with stuff. He's getting some special trick cigars, some trick cufflinks, a watch, a pen, a ring that can blow stuff up. I did like this panel. Let's see if I can get it. Well, these first two panels, I made a note of this. And I just like the two-panel layout that juxtaposes Shield and Hydra. So this guy right here in the first panel, that's the Supreme Hydra, but he's undercover as Shield agent Bronson. Now he's contacting Hydra to say, send the Dreadnought. What is the Dreadnought? You'll see in just a minute. But I love, they've got their big maps and they've got the big insignia in the background, and you got Shield on one side, Hydra on the other. I just think that's cool. I love that. So anyway, this weapon. Hold on, there we go. We went back a page. So this weapon called the Dreadnought is being shot up to the helicarrier. What is the Dreadnought? That's the Dreadnought. That's classic. Well, I was going to say that's classic Kirby, but this isn't Jack Kirby, but that looks like something he would draw. So this is, again, bad guys with their androids, right? Or their big robots. More of that here. But this is fun. This is neat because remember how I said I like to read about heroes who take on more physically imposing, more physically powerful villains than them? Well, it doesn't get more physically powerful than a giant 8-foot-tall android versus totally human Nick Fury. But this is so cool. This is a great issue. Nick Fury throwing out all the stops, trying to beat this giant, well, not giant, 8-foot-tall robot. And luckily, he got all those new gadgets. I thought this sequence was so cool right here. Where this android shot these like metal spikes out of his fingers. But Fury uses one of the gadgets in his watch to sort of, not to put up a shield, it's like a magnetic repulsor. So if you think about putting two magnets together, how they sort of, they push off of one another. He does that here, so those finger spikes sort of go around him. I thought that was a cool shot, plus a nice overhead shot. I thought that was really neat. But yeah, Fury is just pulling out all the stops, using all these new gadgets he got to beat this giant Dreadnought android. What's up, lad? How's it going, man? Secret cigars, yeah. Do people really carry individually wrapped cigars around it? Apparently, because he uses them here. Dum Dum and Gabe and Sitwell, they don't know what's going on with Nick Fury. This is cool too. He's being pelted with gamma rays, which I thought would turn him into a Hulk, but it doesn't. But that's a cool visual. That black and white, the rings. I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, most of this issue is just Fury taking on a giant robot. Meanwhile, Lara Brown. So remember, Lara Brown is the daughter of the original Supreme Hydra, who helped Nick Fury take down Hydra the first time, roughly 20 issues ago. Roughly, maybe more like 15 issues ago. Hydra wants revenge on Lara Brown, and they're gonna get it here. Well, they kidnap her. So she actually right here, I think, is when she learns that who Supreme Hydra, or that he's, Oh yeah, she does learn it right here. Bronson must be the Supreme Hydra, and Bronson. Now remember, they've been feeding all this information into this AutoFac computer, right? And it's running all these calculations to sort of determine who the Supreme Hydra is. She actually says here, Bronson must be the Supreme Hydra, and the Supreme Hydra is... But then Supreme Hydra gets her, and she doesn't get to finish that sentence. So, more to come on that. Maybe next issue? Excuse me. We haven't got there yet, so we'll see. Anyway, more Nick Fury fighting this giant dreadnought. He's getting the crap kicked out of him, but he's also holding his own, and he uses the giant explodey ring to short-circuit the robot. And afterwards, Bronson, a.k.a. the Supreme Hydra, excuse me, has made the AutoFac look like it came up with Laura Brown as the Supreme Hydra. And that's not good. So now, he's totally throwing him off the trail again. So again, for another issue, Hydra is one step ahead of S.H.I.E.L.D. And it's so interesting because, S.H.I.E.L.D. is like S.H.I.E.L.D. They're infallible. They can do no wrong. But yet Hydra is one step ahead of them again. So this was a fun issue. I'm looking forward to the next one. I'm looking forward to finding out who the Supreme Hydra really is. It's got to be Red Skull, right? I mean, I feel like I should know, seeing as how these issues are 50-something years old. But I don't know for sure. So it's got to be Red Skull. But I also think that he is in Tales of Suspense based on the next issue. I don't know. Red Skull is going to pop up somewhere. He's either going to pop up in Strange Tales or he's going to pop up in Tales of Suspense. So we'll have to see. I'm going to feel really dumb if he doesn't show up anywhere. But we'll find out more next issue. All right, last but not least is Fantastic Four number 60. Now, this was a pretty cool issue right up until the stupid end. But other than that, it was pretty good. So if you remember, Doctor Doom has stolen the cosmic powers of the Silver Surfer. He's been flying around the Earth for the last couple issues, just causing mayhem. Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. He's been turning hot places cold and cold places hot and making gorillas big and red and all that kind of stuff. He's basically kind of being a dick. Like, he's not really hurting anybody. He's just being a jerk. The Fantastic Four are powerless to stop him. They're all down and out. Doctor Doom's plan to not physically defeat them because he wants them to live with the fact that they couldn't stop him and he could come and defeat them anytime. That's working. Like, they're really doubting themselves, right? So they're watching Doctor Doom fly around, being a dick, right? Just being a jerk, doing all this stupid stuff with his cosmic powers. Meanwhile, Human Torch takes on cosmically powered Doctor Doom. Not a good idea. He's not a match for Doctor Doom. But it's fun to watch him try. So we get some good action shots of Johnny versus Doctor Doom. I did take this panel and I doctored it a little bit. I don't have it here. But check at @_comics daily right there to see that panel. I just changed the word balloons. Just Doctor Doom just wanting to catch some waves before work, He's still got the Silver Surfer stuck in a tower. Just holding him captive, as you do. Meanwhile, the rest of the Fantastic Four are headed to where Johnny is because last issue, remember, Reed Richards came up with a device that is going to supposedly stop Doctor Doom. Now, I did say last issue that it was able to knock Ben off of his feet, but Doctor Doom, cosmic powered Doctor Doom, is way more powerful than Ben. So why does Reed think that his little gadget's going to work? Well, turns out that was just a small prototype, and he's actually sent that off to the military to build a big one. Okay. So this issue is them fighting Doom, waiting for that giant device to show up from the military. And the rest of this issue is the Fantastic Four fighting a cosmically powered Doctor Doom, and that's awesome. There's nothing better than a good old-fashioned Fantastic Four versus Doom fight. Well, I'd say nothing better. You could say Spider-Man versus Green Goblin. You could say Captain America versus Red Skull. Maybe Iron Man versus Mandarin. Daredevil versus Bullseye, or Daredevil versus Kingpin, or Daredevil versus Elektra. Arch enemies, right? But Fantastic Four versus Doctor Doom, that's awesome. Anybody versus Doctor Doom's awesome, because Doctor Doom's awesome. It's my favorite supervillain. My favorite Marvel supervillain. Anyway, he's fighting the Thing, growing his hands all big, looking all swole, kicking the crap out of the Thing. The Watcher really wants to intervene, but he can't because he's a Watcher. He's sworn not to intervene. He's got some different clothes too. So he basically just turns a blind eye and says, I really want to intervene, but I can't, so I'm just going to go to some other planet and watch something else. I'm going to change the channel, is what the Watcher says, right? Anyway, the Fantastic Four, they don't have a prayer in hell, basically, of defeating Doctor Doom. Things are looking pretty dreary for them. I know I'm going through these pages pretty fast, but it's all just a big fight. Sue, I like this page. Sue does manage to make Doctor Doom fly into the side of a mountain by making the side of the mountain invisible. So she stands, she's standing in front of a mountain. Or maybe just a big hill, I don't know. But she makes it invisible, so Doom's charging at Sue. She ducks down. Boom. He hits what looks like nothing. But it turns out, idiot, you just crashed into the side of a mountain. That's funny. But that doesn't stop him. I mean, it, knocks the wind out of him maybe, but it doesn't stop him. Meanwhile, the Inhumans, remember they got out of their big impenetrable dome last issue? Things are pretty grim. Good one, Latin. But yeah, remember the Inhumans got out of their impenetrable dome last issue. Black Bolt used his sonic... It's not a sonic scream, that's Black Canary. His powerful voice, right, to shatter the dome. And now they're out, cutting down trees. They're going to rebuild their city, I guess. One tree at a time. I'm not really sure what... Oh, no. They left the other Inhumans to do that. They're actually in the search of the Fantastic Four, right? But they aren't there yet. Some hunters, I guess, see the Inhumans, and the Inhumans sort of take them down. I don't know. There's a couple pages of Inhuman stuff here, but it doesn't really factor into the story. Meanwhile, Doom is about to finish off the Fantastic Four, but then lo and behold, the life-size version of Reed's gadget goes flying overhead. Okay. Reed says, only Army Ordnance, in collaboration with Tony Stark's vast munitions complex, had the resources to build it in time. Talking about the big version of his little bat-looking thing that he built last issue. It staggered me, but it couldn't down me. You failed, Richards. My cosmic power is still too great for you. Even as I stand here, my strength returns to its matchless peak. Now my victory is doubly sweet, for even the weapon you yourself designed, even your own genius, could not defeat me. Now, before the end comes, watch me. I shall prove my utter contempt for you and your ineffectual ship by pursuing it, and then with one mere cosmic bolt, I'll reduce it to total nothingness. So, let me summarize how they defeated Doctor Doom. They basically flew this thing overhead to sort of hit Doom and knock him off his feet, right? And then that thing just keeps going up to space, right? So Doom's here, the thing's coming, boom, knocks him down, and the thing keeps going up, or not the thing, not Ben, but this gadget keeps flying off into space. Reed gambled on the fact that A, Doom would chase after the thing like a dog playing fetch would chase after a ball, right? So Doom's going to go chase after this thing that's heading up into space. But don't forget, Galactus banished Silver Surfer to Earth. meaning he couldn't leave Earth. So but since Doctor Doom has the Silver Surfer's powers, cosmic powers, when Doom flew up, headed towards space, looking like he was going to leave the Earth, that counteracted that caused Doom to lose the Silver Surfer's powers because he was in effect trying to leave Earth, which Galactus basically put a curse on Silver Surfer. It wasn't a curse, but you can think of it that way. He put a curse on Silver Surfer that said if you leave the Earth, you're going to lose your powers. It wasn't spelled out that clearly, but that's essentially what it was. Since Doom had Silver Surfer's powers, when he tried to leave Earth, he lost his powers. And I guess that just happened to restore the Surfer's powers back to him. The last panel is the Surfer's surfboard flying back to the Surfer. It was a really lame, super lame ending to what otherwise has been a pretty cool story. My thought about this was a fun, action-packed final chapter in the story of the cosmically powered Doctor Doom. I enjoyed everything about it until the final page when Doom's defeat happened off-panel, and it was the result of a wild assumption by Reed that just happened to be correct. I thought the Inhumans would wind up helping the Fantastic Four, but I was completely wrong, which I was. They spend a page in this issue chopping down trees. These last few issues have been fun, but this ending was a complete letdown. And it was. And this is the end of the Doctor Doom, cosmically powered Doctor Doom story. It was a letdown, man. Everything else was cool up until this part right here. This was really stupid. So, but otherwise, a pretty decent story. And I have no idea what's coming next issue. I think I want to page to the next. I know you can't see the cover too well. Sandman pops back up. So I guess, the Inhumans are just going to be running around the forest for a while, I suppose. But, yeah, we'll see, it says next, a new danger dawns. Well, I guess we'll see what new danger dawns next week. So, that's it, guys. I appreciate you hanging out with me, talking about comics from March 1967. If you want to keep up with these things as I read them every day, follow me over here at _Comics Daily. Don't forget the underscore right here. Don't forget the underscore in front, and then just Comics Daily after that. I tweet more stuff than, I'll point out like silly panels and things like that I find. Or in the instance of this issue, I'd completely completely doctored the one panel of Doctor Doom holding the surfboard because I thought that looked funny. But yeah, if you want to follow me at _Comics Daily on Twitter, and I post about one issue of this every day. Although I did miss this past Saturday, so oops, my bad. Sorry about that. Didn't see that panel on the Twitter page. Yeah, it's there. There, the panel of Doctor Doom holding the surfboard. It's there. But yeah, so that's it. Appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I'll be back next week, probably next Monday, talking about comics from April 1967. I've already read a couple of them, and they're pretty good. Spider-Man was good. Spider-Man is pretty much always good. And I read Daredevil. I've already read Daredevil and Tales of Suspense. Daredevil wasn't good. I'll go ahead and spoil that for you. Daredevil wasn't good again. But we'll get to that next week. So guys, I'm out of here for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.